Mental health workers of Reddit, what's the most ducked up thing you have seen? 1. By far, the most heartbreaking things for me usually involved repetitive movements and the person being nonverbal. Let me explain. I was helping cover night shift for a residential treatment center. As I'm doing room checks, I hear this repetitive banging sound coming from the room at the farthest end of the hall. Go down there as quickly as I can and see the girl laying face down, raising her upper body up off of the pillow and slamming back down on the bed over and over and over again, all while she was asleep. When I grabbed another staff, they just kind of shrugged and said, "Yeah, she does that like every night." It's sad, isn't it? Turns out it's a thing called RMD, and can sometimes happen in kids for a variety of reasons, but hers was definitely mental health and trauma related. Also, had another teenage girl get brought in right after a guy had picked her up, gotten her high on bath salts, and sexually assaulted her. I saw her sitting in a chair, completely nonverbal with an absolute blank expression on her face, bruises and cuts on her neck and legs, just rocking back and forth and twisting and pulling her hair to the point it was all just a giant knot. I can handle screaming, sobbing, fighting, all of that. But when you see someone who is completely non-responsive just doing the same movements over and over again, you feel completely at a loss. 2. A patient on our ward, with chronic schizophrenia and delusions of persecution, having already blinded himself in one eye and amputated a finger in the past, managed to get some craft scissors and castrate himself while under our care, and flushed his testicles down the toilet. He came out of his room into the hall with a bloody V down his hospital pant legs, a bit shaken looking, but otherwise calm. Edit. Spelling edit 2. Just remembered another one. A 30-something guy, again with these religious-based delusions, became convinced that God wanted him to cut off his arm. So he built an elaborate guillotine in the woods near his town, and had the whole thing arranged where he chopped his own arm off, put a belt tourniquet on it, walked to town, and had someone call 911. He was brought to our hospital and medically stabilized, then transferred to our psych unit. When first admitted, he was clearly hallucinating the voice of God. He was completely unperturbed at the fact he did not have his right arm any longer. He was right-handed. After about a month of treatment, his psychosis diminished, and it was really sad to see the beginnings of regret forming for him. Whoa. Telling this one, a lot of other really ducked up stories are rushing back to me. I no longer work in inpatient mental health. I'm on the outpatient side now. I don't miss the intense horror and sadness at all. 3. As a psychologist, I sometimes pick up hours at local clinics, weekends mostly. I specialize in children and family issues. A family came in randomly with their 5-year-old son. He had not spoken in a month. Not a word. A month ago, this poor child watched as his 6-year-old brother drowned in the family pool. The parents were unaware that both kids had gone outside. Unbelievable trauma. The 5-year-old had a 1,000-yard stare. Parents were crushed. Edit. Kids with an autism spectrum disorder are 160 times more likely to die from drowning, especially unattended in family-owned pools, compared with the general pediatric population. https://www.nkb.nlm. Gov PMC articles PMC 5,721,095. 4. We had a non-verbal extremely low IQ client who would self-soothe by sticking her finger between her eyeball and her eye socket and rub the side of her eyeball. Our assumption is that she has an extremely high pain tolerance and the stimulation may have actually felt good to her. She was trying to find the screenshot button. 5. Had a patient when I was in my psychiatry rotation in medical school who had said that he had killed 2 people when he was in a gang 15 years ago and was now hearing the voice of God telling to hurt himself as punishment. He kept darting his eyes around the room. Definitely creeped me out during the patient interview. 6. I worked in a psychiatric medical institute for children. One girl, 13, had been pimped out by her mother and abused by several men. One night at bedtime routines, she hadn't come out of the shower yet and had locked herself in. When she finally opened the door, she had bit into her hand, and her veins and tendons were showing. She kept moving her hand to watch them move. Craziest thing was that once she was transported to the hospital, her mother made jokes about how her daughter just wanted to see what it tasted like. This girl basically turned into a celebrity around the campus because all the other children thought she was edgy for what she had done. Mother made jokes about how her daughter just wanted to see what it tasted like. How was the mother not in prison? That's disgusting. How was she not in prison for pimping out her kid? 7. Not a mental health worker but a camp counselor at a camp for underprivileged kids. We had a camper who had blind rage. He would be completely normal then randomly would ducking snap. The very last day of camp, he was just waiting in line for something when someone threw a rock and it hit the kid who had blind rage directly in the eye, causing him to bleed from his eye. I have never heard a worse scream in my entire life. He then starts running towards the kid who hit him in the eye. It ducking took 4 staff to get this 10-year-old to not ducking kill another kid. Edit. We drove him to the hospital instantly. We were deep in the woods. An ambulance would have taken too long. He didn't lose his eye and is fine. When I was a camp counselor at a camp for kids from inner city LA, we had kids that would have a great time all week, then freak the duck out the day before they left camp. I was told this was normal. These kids sort of subconsciously ruin the experience so they don't miss it when they have to return to their shitty day-to-day life. 8. While working in a jail I was called down to someone's cell to assess him for homicidal ideations. When I got there he had carved pieces of his legs out and stated he was a follower of Satan, whom told him he needed to release some spirits from his body. He had a long history of self-harm including swallowing glass. He had a high threshold for pain. Jail was not a place he should have been at, but unfortunately mental health funding is one of the firsts to go when there are budget cuts. 9. I work in the forensic side of mental health. Where do I begin? PT was drunk and was physically assaulted by her boyfriend. Upon arriving at the hospital is hysterical and tells nurse she was sexually assaulted in the back of the ambulance. Medic denies it. During the investigation both are asked to take lie detector tests. He passes. She fails and tries to commit suicide, saying the police have been horrible to her and accused her of lying for attention. She now has brain damage. DNA results come back. She was telling the truth. Woman claims her co-workers at a fast food restaurant are controlling her mind with their iPods. They aren't really co-workers. They are secret military police. They make her black out and gang rape her. She gets pregnant and gives birth under their control and they take the baby and start raping her too. Every night she can hear her daughter begging for help but cannot get to her. She starts calling 911 saying her daughter is being raped and ends up making dozens of calls before she is arrested for misusing 911. She never had a daughter. She refused to believe this and kept screaming at us to go find the bloody sheets in her closet as proof. There were no sheets. I've never seen a human being as scared as she was before that day. But none of it was real. Young guy in his early 20s. Found guilty of raping several children from infancy to 10 years old. Admitted that he started molesting kids when he was a teenager. Admitted to bestiality. He purposely chose infants or disabled kids because they couldn't tell on him. He had journals where he talked about his crimes and drew cartoons of his assaults. He also wrote about his future plans for assaulting more children and invented torture devices he wanted to build. He had plans and diagrams where he was planning on surgically removing his own penis. This guy was a Hannibal Lecter in the making. After he was found guilty and committed, he started torturing himself. He would try to think of painful sexual things to do to himself, and if he found out he was not the first person to think of that particular way to inflict harm, he would rage out. He was obsessed with finding new ways to hurt people in a sexual way. He violated himself multiple times with a plunger while dunking his head in the toilet. Poop. So much poop. Especially in the hair. The smell lingers for days. I've seen and smelled some shit in my day. I'll never understand why lie detector tests are still used. All they measure is if the person is nervous or agitated. I can't help but think that the results of the test contributed to her suicide attempt. People love their pseudoscience. I just saw a job posting the other day for a federal polygraph administrator. Paid 0k. Realistically, it would be like paying me 0k to do tarot readings for the government. At least tarot is honest about what it is. 10. Fun fact. Did you know that batteries have a distinct smell when the contents react with saliva and your stomach contents? Because they do. Exclamation point, here's how I know. Worked in a mental health facility. Girl ate a Duracell AA battery on Christmas. She displayed self-harm which, to her doctor, was attention-seeking behavior. Basically a co-worker and I were working on Christmas Eve and were doing med count. This facility was a facility where it's basically assisted living without getting hands-on. This gave them a sense of normalcy and independence to possibly go back out on their own in the real world, if even possible. For those who don't know, med count, it's when we count meds to make sure the correct doses are there and they correlate with the appropriate day. So she thought we were avoiding her on purpose. We weren't. We were gearing up to make Christmas cookies with them after med count. So we were trying to get a lot done so they would have fun and not have to be interrupted by us leaving to go get meds ready. Another resident comes in not even 5 minutes into my shift and says the remote is missing batteries and she thinks has them and won't give them back. So I go out, ask for batteries and doesn't answer. I keep asking and finally get a muffled answer. No. So putting on my metaphorical dad pants, I put on gloves, ask her to come to the office, and sit her down with us and say, alright, spit it out, now. And I hold out my hand. It takes her a minute but she complies and out comes what's left of a Duracell AA battery. My co-worker almost throws up. She's got black stained lips and they clearly have the start of chemical burns on them. When the battery hits my hand I immediately feel the heat from the contents seeping through the glove. So I take it off and put it in a bag for the paramedics and for evidence for her doctor. My co-worker is outside dry heaving still. The metallic smell mixed with burnt skin and vomit filled the office and I almost lost it but kept it together. She then says my stomach and mouth hurt really bad. Well yeah, I reply. You just ate a battery. Why would you do something silly like that? If you needed to talk you know you have my co-worker and I. She shrugged and then asked, am I going to be 302D? For those who don't know, 302 is a code for someone who's involuntary committed basically. I respond with well I'm going to be honest, you're going to hospital. That's not changing, and I'm sorry about that, but it's happening because we don't know why your stomach hurts so they will check you out. As far as being 302D, that's not what I'm focused on at the moment. At the time I was more focused on the mixture of black sludge throwing up mixed with half digested food. I knew why her stomach hurt but I needed to calm her down. BC if anyone knows, telling a patient or resident they will be 302D isn't a good idea at all. She went to hospital and they ended up committing her decision. They regulated her meds and she was back in a week's time. This wasn't the last incident with her, but on Christmas Eve it was way more than I wanted to deal with tbh. Needless to say, no one ended up making Christmas cookies. 11.